Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Mike, I'd like to say a few words.
Well, I appreciate it, Mr. President. As I told you last night, shortly after the Senate vote, I know I speak on behalf of the entire cabinet and of millions of Americans when I say congratulations and thank you. Thank you for seeing through the course of this year an agenda that truly is restoring this country. You described it very well, Mr. President. From the outset of this administration, we've been rebuilding our military, putting the safety and security of the American people first. You've restored American credibility on the world stage. We're standing with our allies. We're standing up to our enemies. But you promised economic renewal at home. You said we could make this economy great again. And you promised to roll back regulations. And you signed more bills rolling back federal red tape than any president in American history. You've unleashed American energy. You've spurred an optimism in this country that's setting records. But you promised the American people in that campaign a year ago that you would deliver historic tax cuts. And it would be a middle-class miracle. And in just a short period of time, that promise will be fulfilled. And I'm deeply humbled as your Vice President to be able to be here because of your leadership, Mr. President, and because of the strong support of the leadership in the Congress of the United States. You're delivering on that middle-class miracle. You've actually got the Congress to do, as you said, what they couldn't do with Anwar for 40 years. You've got the Congress to do with tax cuts for working families and American businesses what they haven't been able to do for 31 years. And you got Congress to do what they couldn't do for 7 years in repealing the individual mandate in Obamacare. I know you would have me also acknowledge people around this table, Mr. President. I want to thank the leaders in Congress once again for their partnership in this. I want to thank your outstanding team, your Secretary of the Treasury, Stephen Mnuchin, for Gary Cohen, for Ivanka Trump, for your great legislative team, all the members of this cabinet who partnered to drive your vision forward over the past 6 months after you laid out that vision for tax reform. But mostly, Mr. President, I'll end where I began and just tell you, I want to thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank you for speaking on behalf of and fighting every day for the forgotten men and women of America. Because of your determination, because of your leadership, the forgotten men and women of America are forgotten no more, and we are making America great again. Thank you, Mr. President. God bless you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
It is Thursday, December 21st of 2017, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Thank you for joining us. We do have our daily special. It is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, so I'm so glad that you've joined us, and happy winter solstice. I hope that you are enjoying the shortest day of the year. At least they say it is the shortest day of the year. Well, with that stated, it is another big news day here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We've been working diligently back in the kitchen to curate a menu that would be appropriate for the day. And since it's winter solstice, the shortest day of the world, I suppose we shouldn't dally, should we? Well, the tax scam that the GOP is ramming down our throats seems to be pretty much a foregone conclusion, doesn't it? Bob Corker discovered, apparently there was a provision penned into the bill at the last minute, and of course no one's read the bill, and Bob Corker personally, it's almost as if it was the Corker kickback is what they called it. One investment, he'd make a lot of money. Well, apparently it's more than one. Apparently Bob Corker has about 10. Oh, I take that back. Dozens of corrections that he has to make about investments that he's going to benefit from the GOP tax scam. Well, isn't that nice? I think that is why they're in Congress, because they are representing their constituents. And if you look at the ideal of a representative democracy, or a representative democratic republic, to be more exact, the office holder are constituents too. So he's just taking care of his constituents. But if you ask Bob Corker, he didn't know. He didn't know. The judge declared a mistrial in the Bundy case out there in Nevada. Apparently pulling weaponry against federal officers. Jurors just can't determine if that's a crime or not. So I don't know what it is about the Bundys. They get a lot of mistrials, almost as if there's some kind of jury nullification going on. Well, that's only speculation now, isn't it? Of course, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, you'll notice the sign that says, we replace the sign that says we reserve the right to refuse service with we reserve the right to be highly speculative, hyperbolic, and humorous, at least to us. So beware. Okay. Oh, of course, Mike Pence. Praising Hair Furor. I thought I was in Guyana there for a bit. And then I realized, no, we're right up there in the eagle's nest, aren't we? Or it could be an ice palace somewhere, I don't know, near Gorky Park. Maybe that's where we were. But it just didn't seem like America. That's the political structure we are in right now, and I know a political strategy in which to alleviate us of this problem. And it demands action on all of our parts, and ultimately we have to vote. Yes, we do. Okay, these are the items that we are offering today on the menu here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. In the front cafe, we'll examine how an Alabama town revolted after the mayor, the judge, the prosecutor, and the town cops set up an asset forfeiture scam to rip off the town folk. And this is a small town, too. Jeez. A California woman detained by ICE sues the agency. Why? Well, because she's a citizen of the United States. I told you this was going to happen. And the U.S. Department of Education canceled the student loan debts of 12,900 people defrauded by defunct diploma mill Corinthian Colleges. Well, once they start giving back the student loans for those who went to Trump College, then we might have something here, huh? Well, then after the break, we'll move to the chef's table for an exploration into the murder of the Mexican investigative journalist, brutally shot to death, not only at his 6-year-old's primary school, but in front of his 6-year-old at his 6-year-old's primary school during a Christmas celebration. Oh, jeez. And a report just issued by Britain's Parliament reveals Trump's campaign pledge to revive waterboarding and other torture techniques seriously rattled the nation's spy agencies. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with me, your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Bon appetit. All right, as we're settling in here in the front cafe, I should remind you that if you go to netrootsradio.com and scroll to the bottom of the homepage, to the rightish there, you'll notice the chat room link, and do link up with that. Kelly, Rowing Girl, does monitor it regularly during the day and often is on it quite a bit. And to the leftish of that chat room link are the contribute donate buttons, and that is how we pay our bills. We are unable to do it without you, so thank you for that. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, I'm on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and of course on Daily Co's as Justice Putnam. And that's my real name. I didn't make it up. This first dish here at the Front Cafe in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by the great Sarah K. Burris from Raw Story. Now, I understand in these perilous economic times how cash-strapped small towns are finding it increasingly difficult in which, well, to operate. And so when revenues are falling, you have to be creative, don't you? And if you're going to be creative, you might as well use the tools that have already been given to you. Use them. Use them. The police department of a small Alabama town was nearing bankruptcy due to a lack of ticket revenue. The cash-strapped department and city council took drastic measures with an assets forfeiture program for those caught speeding. Now the mayor of the city is blaming the bad press about the sketchy scheme and a 7-plaintiff lawsuit for a drop in revenue. What the department would do is impound vehicles they pulled over using the state's assets forfeiture law. It allowed them to keep 100% of the items taken by police. The claim would be that there was a suspicion of drugs or anything they could come up with. Broken taillight. Gotta take your car. That then required owners of those vehicles to also pay a $500 impound fee. The town hired officers. Well, see, they're just creating jobs. The town hired officers and worked with a judge to maintain the program. Those that were hired were often dressed in camouflage that was tucked into dark assault boots. One alleged victim was Trey Crozier, who lost $1,750 to the Castleberry Police Department. The 550-person town. 550. Jeez. And they have to have a paramilitary group and a special court system? The 550-person town was so furious about the program, Mayor J.B. Jackson, who came up with the idea to stop and confiscate vehicles, was booted from office. A municipal court judge and prosecutor were also ousted. Police Chief Tracy Hawsey was forced to resign in February. Lead attorney Richard Nix thinks more than 100 people were impacted by the city's program. All of the belongings and alleged drugs that were seized by police haven't been located in this investigation. The totality of cash taken estimates at $5,500. He claimed that the chief did not follow minimal procedural requirements to perform an asset forfeiture. So $5,500, they don't know where it went. Yep. One plaintiff claimed police stole $3,800 from her vehicle because they said the cash was obviously part of proceeds from an illegal drug dealing or activity. She still doesn't have her car back because there's no record of a civil forfeiture request being filed. We'll just take your car. Paperwork. That's for little people. We didn't have much, so Hazi's come to me and said there is a lot of crime in this town and a lot of drugs coming through this town, the mayor said. So the police chief said, why don't we set up a court system and get some money coming in? Okay. I don't know. Seems to me like that's the go-getting police chief. He's an earner. The department was created in 2009. At least 5 police officers were paid more than 5 times the national per capita average. We hired our own DA and our own judge, the mayor said. The revenue started to grow when we built our police department. There's even evidence of Hazi, the police chief, gloating on Facebook. He posted pictures of those arrested and videos showing him joking with them about their arrests. Jackson, the mayor, never denied the department's program was set up to garner money and turn the department into a policing for profit. In wake of the town's financial crisis, word of the lawsuit spread fast. It's only 550 people. Suddenly, the city was slapped with $60,000 in unpaid bills and 6 figures in debt. The town is split on whether or not to keep the police department, but townspeople are split on where to go moving forward. The city council voted 3-2 to keep the police department active on a limited basis. Yeah, I hope they're not confiscating property illegally. Now, of course, let's remember, folks, Alabama senator, former senator from Alabama, now Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is one of the biggest, greatest proponents of civil forfeiture. He said, with care, we've got to be careful. And professionalism, we plan to develop policies to increase forfeitures, Sessions told a crowd of law enforcement officials in Minneapolis in July. All right. Oh, also, you get your property taken from you. Then it's up to you to prove your innocence. And even when that happens, you don't get your property back automatically. Then you have to file. You have to apply for it. And in this case, in this little town of Castleberry, Alabama, they just don't have any record of taking your property, which seems to me to be a gross constitutional violation as well. The whole concept of a taking. If the government takes your property, they have to recompense you in an equal market value. Or, well, at least what they assess it to be. And that no paperwork was even filed here because it was a snatch and grab scheme. Now, I always hate, or maybe I revel, but truly, deep down, I hate telling people I told you so. And the inherent racism of this current administration is embodied in this next story. Because we were all warned. We warned each other. We knew exactly what was going to happen, and now it is. This is out of the International Business Times, penned by Joe DeFazio. A California woman filed a lawsuit Tuesday against the United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement for detaining her, despite the fact that she has been a citizen for more than 20 years. Guadalupe Plasencia, 60, said she was detained by the Ontario, California Police Department on March 29th when she attempted to collect her gun from the police station. The department, which was also named in the suit, retrieved the weapon from her car, which was involved in an accident. Instead of walking out with her things, however, Ms. Plasencia found herself under arrest, the lawsuit said. To her shock and dismay, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department took her into custody and handed her over to ICE agents that arrested, handcuffed, and detained her, even though Ms. Plasencia reportedly told both county and federal officers that she is an American citizen and offered to provide documents showing this to be true. And the ACLU of Southern California is helping Plasencia with the lawsuit. Plasencia had a permit for the gun and was initially arrested by police on a 10-year-old warrant for not appearing in court as a witness in a matter that had been resolved 9 years earlier. The lawsuit said that the database that ICE uses does not contain naturalization records prior to 1994 and contains spotty information prior to 2008. Now, I've known German bookkeeping. I've studied German bookkeeping. And if you're going to be a Teutonic stormtrooper with your jack boots tucked in, with your camouflage pants tucked into your jack boots, you gotta keep your record keeping. For keeps. Come on. All right. Also, she's a Latina. Let's be clear about this. She's a Latina, and they were messing with her. They didn't care if she's a citizen. She's a woman of color, the worst kind. We've got to get those types out of this country now. And these little Gestapo stormtroopers, yeah, I'm calling them that. If they're behaving like this, then they're no better. I mean, we're way past Hannah Arendt here. Way past. After Plasencia was arrested for the old warrant, ICE sent the San Bernardino sheriffs an immigration retainer to keep her in custody for up to 48 hours. She's a U.S. citizen. Plasencia consented to be interviewed by ICE by signing a form. The form is part of a California law that took effect this year that aimed to have more transparency in immigration holds. The Sheriff's Department said that after Plasencia was released from their custody, she was detained by ICE and taken to their San Bernardino office. Plasencia's lawyers said that ICE made fun of her, threatened to deport her, and did not listen to her repeated claims that she was a citizen. ICE then called her daughter, who showed up with her passport, after which she was then released. Good thing she had a passport, huh? Ms. Plasencia's ordeal was entirely preventable if officers had taken a moment to properly investigate her citizenship and listen to her repeated pleas that she was a lawful U.S. citizen, said James M. Perez, one of Plasencia's attorneys. Rather, Ms. Plasencia, a mother of 5, a grandmother of 16, and a business owner, was made to feel that she did not belong in her own country. This lawsuit seeks to protect Ms. Plasencia's right to live in this country without fear of being unlawfully detained. Well, I don't know. I think they wanted her to feel unwelcome. Well, the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department, in their stead, did say they no longer participate in immigration enforcement, but they do provide information to federal authorities when asked. And the ACLU criticized the police department for their cooperation with ICE. Placencia's case shows why collaboration between ICE and local law enforcement is especially dangerous. San Bernardino Sheriff's deputies should know better than to trust ICE, as the agency relies on outdated and error-ridden databases to justify its arrests. Their record keeping is spotty before 2008, so she didn't show up as being a citizen, and she's brown. She's got a funny last name. Especially in light of Placencia's constant assertions that she is a U.S. citizen, neither the county nor ICE had probable cause to detain her. The ACLU continued in their statement, this collaboration resulted in violations of a U.S. citizen's constitutional rights. I think we are at a point now where some people are determined to be citizens and others are lucky if they're 3/5. All right, this last item on the menu here in the front cafe in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is brought to you by Reuters, penned by Lisa Lambert. Now, I've always had an issue about companies that have been adjudicated in civil and criminal cases as having defrauded victims. And with student loans, I've always been mystified that when these diploma mill shams have been adjudicated as the frauds they are, that those who have been the victims of that fraud still have to pay the bills. Normally when you've had something stolen from you, you get it back. So I'm just been a bit confused about that. I know. The GOP made pass some bills that you couldn't sue and claim bankruptcy if you happened to be a student taking out a loan, because then you could become a victim of a fraud, which was they knew that you would be a victim of a fraud. But everybody's making some money somewhere, I guess. Okay. The U.S. Education Department on Wednesday canceled student loan debts of 12,900 people defrauded by defunct Corinthian Colleges after an internal review showed it stopped granting relief to former attendees of Corinthian and other failed for-profit schools once Donald Trump took office. Because he had his own fraudulent college, didn't he? The department said it also denied 8,600 requests for debt relief. It gave no reason for the denials and gave no value for the 12,900 loans that were canceled. Now, how they've determined these 12,900, the amount of relief, because they're not just forgiven all of it, but the amount is determined by the job they have now, not by the fact that they were victims of a fraud, but ostensibly from whatever they picked up at Corinthian, they were able to get a job or not, and that determines the amount of debt relief they have. Okay, under the discharging process, borrowers earning less than 50% of their peers will receive full relief, and those earning more will receive partial relief. It will also give borrowers credit for interest that accrues on loans if by the time they decide to whether they qualify for relief takes longer than a year. Okay. That's rather generous from a mob crew, I suppose. Let's get to our break, and we'll come back to the chef's table in the back. And, of course, we'll break down the front cafe to it. Well, camouflage cookbook store, because we're hiding the fact that there's fun and games in the Speakeasy at the chef's table. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Tuesday, December 19th, 2017. I'm Mark Boulanger. Labor organizations around the world commemorated International Migrants' Day on December 18th to fight for the rights of migrant workers. There are about 232 million migrants in the world. One of the labor organizations which used the day to renew its efforts to support migrants was the European Trade Union Confederation. The ETUC represents some 45 million workers in 39 countries. Liana Carr is the ETUC's Federal Secretary. She released a video on International Migrants' Day.
On this special occasion, I renew our commitment to support undocumented workers' rights. The ETUC expresses solidarity with all migrants and is thankful to Europeans who, saving lives at sea, keep our common values high. It is time for our politicians to take real action to stop the inhumane treatment of migrants by criminals in refugee camps. We need to work together to create opportunities for migrant workers to become part of our labour markets and societies. Labour inclusion and access to rights is key to ensuring dignity for those who settle and work in Europe. Recruiting and organising migrant workers, whether documented or undocumented, is vital for the rights and conditions of all working people. Only a united workers' movement that protects everyone and fights for everyone will be strong enough to succeed.
Fighting the use of offshore tax havens is one of Labour's most important battles because the lost tax revenue could pay for decent public services and wages. So imagine the surprise of people at the Canadian Labour Congress this week when they found out that the pension funds of 25 million workers in the country have used tax havens. The news that tax havens have been used by the pension funds came from an analysis of the Paradise Papers, which showed how corporations and other organizations are using countries such as Bermuda to avoid paying taxes. The problem in this case is not that the pension funds are avoiding taxes in Canada. In Canada, pension funds do not pay taxes on their investment income. The funds are using the tax havens to avoid paying taxes in the countries where they are making investments. This further legitimizes the use of tax havens, which are stealing billions of dollars in tax revenue from countries all around the world. Hassan Yousaf is the president of the Canadian Labour Congress, the CLC.
It's really an affront to the members who expect the pension plan investment arm to operate in an ethical way. This is not the reality, and politicians should be absolutely outraged that this is happening.
The Canadian pension funds involved in the use of offshore tax havens include the National Pension Plan, the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, and the Public Sector Pension Investment Board. Labor organizations are doing their best to publicize the misuse of tax havens. One of those organizations is Public Services International. The PSI represents 20 million workers who are members of 700 unions in 154 countries. It has been conducting a campaign to help more people understand that global regulations and investment rules, plus corporate greed, are allowing billions to be stolen from economically poor countries all over the world. As part of its global campaign for tax justice, the PSI has released a report about corporations and how they steal money from the poor. You can find out more about the PSI campaign for tax justice by visiting its website at www.world-psi.org. And that's it. International labor news you can use. Radio Labor's newscasts are available on its website, iTunes, mobile phones, union websites, and community radio stations. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
For most of us, food is not just fodder to get us through the day. It touches us emotionally, culturally, personally. We see this special connection when we gather family and friends for holiday meals. But it's often in the worst of times that our deep relationship to food reveals itself most powerfully. In August, for example, after Hurricane Harvey devastated Houston and the Texas Gulf Coast, the sure signs of people's resilience came not only from the sound of power tools, but also from the aromas of barbecue wafting across a neighborhood, or a big pot of shrimp gumbo simmering on a butane burner set up on a street corner and dished out free to anyone who needed or wanted some. As New York Times reporter Kim Severson wrote about flooded-out Houstonians, no matter what, cooks are going to cook. After the hurricane, 134,000 homes in the 10-county area around the Bayou City were destroyed or swamped with muck and polluted water. The emotional and cultural impact, Severson wrote, is most keenly felt at mealtimes. The kitchen is the heartbeat of a home and, by extension, of a community. So, despite the obstacles, Houstonians cooked, improvising with ice chests, hot plates, and crock pots to create kitchens and second-floor bedrooms, outdoor decks, or any dry spots they could find. She wrote about 70-year-old Al Marcus. 4 feet of bayou water destroyed his kitchen. Yet only days later, he had fired up his backyard smoker and cooked 140 pounds of brisket to provide sustenance and a serving of normalcy to the families and volunteers who were stripping waterlogged sheetrock from storm-damaged homes. "What else am I going to do?" Al asked. This was Jim Hightower saying, that's the true nature of food. It's not just another consumer commodity. Food is us, socially as well as biologically.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.
From New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. For the second time in 2 months, Saudi Arabia says it's intercepted a missile fired by Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen. The missile reportedly traveled hundreds of miles from Yemen toward the Saudi capital of Riyadh before being destroyed. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia accuse Iran of providing Yemen's Houthi rebels with long-range missile technology, evidence, they say, of Iran's intent to destabilize the Middle East. That U.S. campaign against Iran appears to have a new ally, France. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said on Monday that France is increasingly concerned with Iran's ballistic missile technology, and he didn't rule out the possibility of imposing new sanctions on Iran over its behavior. But while the Trump administration may have found another partner willing to publicly condemn Iran, French officials have repeatedly said they wish to keep a 2015 nuclear deal in place, something President Trump has not yet committed to. And speaking of missiles and missile defense, Japan has now agreed to acquire a pair of American-made missile defense systems in an effort to defend against North Korea. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's government had been eyeing a number of U.S.-made missile defense systems, but settled on Lockheed Martin's Aegis Ashore system because of its cost and wide geographic range. The 2 onshore missile defense sites are estimated to cost over $1.5 billion, but will reportedly be able to protect all of Japan's mainland. Thanks to a pacifist post-war constitution, Japan's military has long lagged behind its peers in the Asia-Pacific, but that's changed in recent years as Prime Minister Abe allocated more money for national defense and has sought to modify the Japanese constitution to give the country greater ability to assist its allies in the event of conflict. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
We have everything set up here for you at the chef's table. Thank you for joining us. You are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and we've curated the rest of the show for you, so settle in. We'll give you a little palate cleanser, as we call it, with weather from around the world. And we start off here along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon. That's where the mothership for Netroots Radio is. Currently, we are at 29 degrees. We have an expected high of 45, a low of 30, though it may get back down into the 20s again tonight. No precipitation, snow forecast. We did have quite a dusting in the hills surrounding me. I'm just a notch below 2,500 feet. And so there's a lot of snow above that. So, and it's quite pretty. And it looks like maybe no rain or snow through Christmas, though we do have an expectation of some rain next Thursday, but that's way far out. We'll see how that goes. Okay, air quality index is good at 43 parts per million. Pressure is low, of course, at 30.43 inches. Visibility at 7 miles. And humidity is at 80%. So when it's cold like that, it freezes. Whatever is moisture will freeze, and it should. Okay, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they have purchased, and these people live around the world. London is 53 with scattered clouds. Paris is 47 and overcast. Rome is 50 and clear. Kiev is 28 degrees with snow. Kabul is 50 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 60 degrees and clear. Tokyo is 42 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 68 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 48 degrees and clear, and New York is 36 degrees Fahrenheit and clear. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people live around the world. Well, there's no joking around about this first dish on the menu here at the chef's table. I'm pretty sure being a journalist has now taken over from being a logger or a crab fisherman as being the most dangerous job in the world, since so many seem to be injured and just killed. This is by Luke Barnes out of Think Progress. A Mexican journalist was shot to death in his 6-year-old son's primary school, the latest horrifying incident in the country's endless, escalating wave of violence. This happened on Tuesday, by the way. Guillermo Perez Aguilondo was attending a nativity procession in the city of Acayucan in the southeastern Mexican state of Veracruz. According to local media, 3 gunmen had followed Aguilondo to the school as celebrations were taking place. The 3 gunmen shot Aguilondo 9 times in front of a classroom full of school children, including 1 execution-style shot in the head. Aguilondo was the crime reporter and founder of La Voz del Sur, a news site covering the state of Oaxaca in southern Mexico. According to the Mexican website Proceso, he had previously been attacked by a lawyer at a public prosecutor's office. In 2016, Aguilondo was one of a group of journalists who demanded justice for their murdered colleague, Candido Rios Vasquez, according to the website Sin Embargo. The governor of the state of Veracruz, Miguel Ángel Núñez, tweeted his condolences and said that he'd placed Aguilondo's family under police protection. I don't know. Are they really that safe now? I lament the horrifying and cowardly attack on Guillermo Perez Aguilondo, the mayor said, or the governor said. I've told the Secretary of Public Security to put his family under protection, and A special group has been sent to investigate the crime. Clean up the mess. I'm sorry for being a bit cynical here, but the level of corruption, you just got to be, you have to suspect where it's coming from. And if someone is giving condolences, that doesn't necessarily, what's the term we used to use in seminary school? Oh, yeah, absolve. Just saying. Aguilando's murder is the 12th killing of a journalist this year in Mexico. One a month. That's not so bad. Which makes it the deadliest country in the world for reporters outside of Syria. In the land of drug cartels, journalists who cover political corruption or organized crime are almost systematically targeted, threatened, and often gunned down in cold blood. Reporters Without Borders reported. Most of these murders remain unpunished, an impunity attributable to Mexico's widespread corruption, especially at the local level, where officials are often directly linked to cartels. So police protection may not be the best protection. Well, it might be protecting the cartels, making sure the families stay shut up. Earlier in December, the United Nations also released a report describing a profound crisis of safety for reporters in Mexico. And it's not just journalists who are suffering. Mexico is currently on track for its bloodiest year ever, surpassing the 2011 record thought to be the apex of the drug war. In some parts of the country, the problem has become so bad that morgue workers have walked away from their jobs, saying the stench from bodies of backlogged, decomposing murder victims is just too much to bear. That's according to the UK Guardian. Cartels have also evolved from vast drug trafficking organizations to smaller, more violent, and less stable networks, accentuating the violence in the country. Like when the small butterfly wings of America flap, the wind creates a typhoon somewhere else in the world. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's policies to combat the cartels and help lessen the violence in Mexico are focusing on blunt security measures, which are likely to make things worse. Well, of course, this guy's a mobster. We'll go to the Mets. It's war. The State Department, well placed to help with anti-corruption and press freedom measures, has been gutted. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is also fiercely opposed to any sort of cannabis decriminalization, which is crucial in helping to deprive cartels of their profits. Almost makes you think that Sessions is on the take. Legalize the stuff, you might lose your profit. That's what I always heard from the dealers. And their fellow travelers. Just saying. The Mexican government is also continuing to favor a military-first approach despite its awful track record since 2006. The Mexican Congress recently passed a law strengthening the military's role as a law enforcement tool to fight the drug cartels, which critics say is unconstitutional and will allow for the armed forces to operate with impunity. Nah, that would never happen. Of course, we did put a particular and specific provision in the Constitution of the United States about quartering troops, because the idea of a standing army was abhorrent to the founders. But we'll just ignore that part and make everybody own a gun. Maybe a tank, too. Instead of the historical left-wing insurgencies, you are now dealing with a criminal cancer that's eroding everything. Nathan Jones, An expert on drug violence in Mexico told Think Progress, any military man knows you have to be able to provide basic stability for people to eliminate their underlying grievances. And since everybody knows that, and it seems we're actively involved in not providing that basic stability, what would they have in mind? All right. Last course is by Jack Moore out of Newsweek. Trump's pledge to revive torture rattled British spies. Donald Trump's campaign pledge to bring back torture, including the controversial method of waterboarding, seriously concerned British spies before he entered the Oval Office, according to a new government report. The document, published by the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament, the ISC, that is the body that oversees Britain's intelligence agencies, MI5, MI6, and GCHQ, on Tuesday reveals the fears inside the world's top security service about the future president's policy positions. Now that's some consonants. Certain views that the president has expressed, particularly prior to his election, have the potential, if they were to become official policy, to pose difficulties for the UK-USA intelligence relationship. The document reads, these include, inter alia, the potential for a change in the U.S. relationship with Russia and Iran, and a change in policy on the use of torture and cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. It continues. While his predecessor, Barack Obama, remember that guy? God, he was such a great guy. Really, got things done, too. In spite of all the obstacles that was put in his way every step of the way. Never gave him a chance. While his predecessor, Barack Obama, closed American black site facilities abroad, banned torture, and attempted to close the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center, Trump promised to return the use of torture for the purposes of national security while on the presidential campaign in 2017. Well, actually, I think his presidential campaign was in 2016, but we're just splitting hairs. He became the president in 2017 because we're still in 2017, January 20th. Okay, and I would also might include the little tidbit that it's not really he didn't include the idea of torture for national security reasons. But because it riled up his base, they get to we get to beat the crap out of brown and black people again? Okay, we will. And they have. Trump said during his January 20th inauguration, don't tell me it doesn't work. Torture works. No, it doesn't. But, it works for the torturer because it gets them off. They like it. Under the Bush administration, enhanced interrogation techniques, which was a direct translation of what the Nazis called their torture when they were in Nuremberg. Coincidental, huh? Were endorsed and used by the CIA against individuals linked to Al-Qaeda or suspected of extremist links who were detained after the 9/11 attacks. Much of the methods took place at Guantanamo Bay or at detention centers in Iraq, where the U.S. military had invaded in 2003 to topple the regime of Saddam Hussein. Well, they also took them to Poland, and they took them to other places, even, like where the Uyghurs are. They took them there. In fact, they tortured Uyghurs, too, just because. And it wasn't just, suspicions. They handed out money as ransoms and internecine squabbles among tribal leaders, and, you get one warlord saying, oh, yeah, the son of that warlord over there is a terrorist. And so they picked up the 6-year-old and tortured him. Evidence has emerged in the following years of members of the U.S. military and the CIA torturing prisoners in Iraq, particularly at the Abu Ghraib prison, Such methods including sleep deprivation, nudity, slapping prisoners in the face, food deprivation, waterboarding, and walling. Oh, that's a nice way of just calling it when a detainee is slammed up against the wall. I think that takes 3 or 4 soldiers to do that, because it gets tiring. Got to think of, Trump, since his January 20th inauguration, has embarked on an elevated war against radical Islamists. He might try the radical religious fanatics here in this country, and I'm not talking about the Muslims, because they aren't very many in Idaho and Nevada and Utah. But there are some terrorists there in those 3 states. Big old compounds. They practice taking over the United States. And if not that, the little communities who don't know any better. But Britain's Domestic Security Service, MI5, was clear that it would not cooperate with the U.S. intelligence authorities in the use of torture if Trump was to alter the ban put in place by Obama. Anything the black guy wanted, they got to get rid of. I have communicated internally already about this in MI5 that, whatever happens, MI5 will operate within the law and by our values, the agency told the government body. So if any of that changes on the U.S. side, there will be a consequence in the relationship, but we will not collude in any sort of change in that sort of behavior, and of course we won't. MI6, the British agency charged with conducting intelligence operations abroad, was similarly worried about the consequence of Trump reviving some of the darkest years of American behavior on foreign territory. If something happened which caused us fundamentally to revisit our presumption of legality of the U.S. agency's actions, which we have got now hard-won after many years, after all the problems we have discussed, then that would be really difficult, MI6 told the government body. The Trump administration angered British spooks. That's a colloquial homily for spy. When it claimed that GCQ, the British government communications headquarters, had spied on the president when he was a candidate on behalf of Obama. Well, GCHQ called the claim utterly ridiculous, forcing an apology from White House officials. The British intelligence establishment, in the wake of that episode and Trump's statements in and out of office, has put itself on alert for any significant and sudden changes to U.S. policy by the president. That's Trump. We don't call him the president, but it is Trump, who has not held back on other inflammatory campaign promises such as the relocation of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, because that's the end of the world for his base, and they just love that stuff. The UK government must continue to keep a close eye on any changes in U.S. policy and take swift action if there are signs that these might run counter to British laws and values, the ISC concluded in its report. And coincidentally, that concludes our broadcast time here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We're going to have to clean up the kitchen here and get the chef's table ready for tomorrow and put some finishing touches out in the front cafe for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Yes, we'll be maybe we'll be hungover nighthawks, and we'll discuss the woes of the world, or we'll just pick up on the news as it occurs, like we do every day here on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. So continue listening to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365. We have Hartman coming up about 6 minutes after the hour, followed by Amy Goodman and Randy Rhodes, and fantastic programming throughout the rest of the day, if I say so myself. So visit with us tomorrow on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.